Welcome to the Open Door. Jim Hanink here with fellow panelists Mario Ramos-Reyes and Christopher Zehnder. Today, we're going to talk about what it means to be a consistently pro-life physician in California. We'll also explore what it's like to serve immigrants, the poor, and the underinsured. Last but not least, we'll consider what it's like to discover the American Solidarity Party. Our special and welcome guest is Dr. Rene Trabanino. Let's begin in prayer. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful and enkindle in them the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. Let us pray, O God, who has taught the hearts of the faithful by the light of the Holy Spirit. Granted by the gift of the same Spirit, we may be always truly wise and ever rejoice in his consolation. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Dr. Trabanino, Rene, if I may, could you begin by sharing with us a bit about your background and your family?
Sure. So both my parents are from Guatemala originally. My mother's from the southern part of Guatemala, which is a more rural area. This department, the Guatemala is divided into departments. The south part is near the Pacific coast. It's called Santa Rosa. It's a kind of an agricultural area. There's also cattle raising that's done there. When she was young, her father was a cattle raiser, actually. And so that was his occupation. So she was pretty much raised on the farm when she was young. But due to economic issues in terms of prosperity in that area, she moved to the city, and her father sold the farm at some point. And so she had met my father in Guatemala City, the main capital of Guatemala. My father was from a very poor background. He never knew his mother, and he was raised by his grandmother and uncle, and so he really wasn't raised by his father. And so he was from a pretty poor background. Has told me many stories about how he would be given 5 cents to go buy a bubble gum, and he would go buy a fish and fry it and eat it instead. And he really has that knowledge of being poor, really truly poor in terms of material sense. They got married in 1969, and they got married, and my mother followed her brothers, her older brothers, who had come out here to Los Angeles for economic reasons as well. And so there was just a lack of opportunities over there for them. And so they moved out here, and so she followed them here. And I was born in 1976 in the Pico Union district of Los Angeles, which is now primarily immigrants from Central America reside there. But at that time, the immigration situation was much easier for immigrants coming to the United States. So they were able to apply for residency much easier than it is now. The wait is now 10 years or so to apply for residency in some cases. And so that's my beginning and my background. I went to Catholic school. My parents made the sacrifice, put me through Catholic school, which I really appreciate from them. I was taught by Salesian sisters in St. Gertrude, which is in Bell Gardens. I went to St. John Bosco, which is in Bellflower, and it's also taught by Salesian priests. And so I gained my faith from my Catholic faith from my parents and from my schooling. And I really appreciate that, even though in college I went to UCLA, which is a secular organization. And so I went away from the faith, seeing all these great things, about socialism, and wow, like what if we just struggle against the powers that be, and overturn them, and everything will be fine, and we don't need God. That's pretty much the crux of it. And it later on, as I got older, I went away from my faith, but then I got back through different means, reading the scripture, other means, and was able to strengthen my faith little by little and get it back. I wanted to get into teaching, actually research and teaching, and basic science research was my main passion. But my sister got sick with schizophrenia at around that time, and I was taking care of her, and I saw the great need there is in terms of mental health care and just health care in general. And that's how I got into, actually, that's the first time I got interested in medicine, was at that point, after having taught about a year after college. I taught about a year in a high school, teaching science and math in Boyle Heights, a high school named Roosevelt High School. And that's during that my time off, like during the summer, that's when I studied for the MCAT and took the MCAT and applied and got into the MD PhD program at UCLA. Did my PhD at Caltech in California Institute of Technology and Chemistry. But all the while I had that kind of pull towards working with the poor people. It just seemed like the mission. That's something that my mind wanted to do. Went to basic science research, but my heart wanted to work with the poor. So I went to family medicine and was trained in a county hospital. That provided healthcare to people that didn't have insurance at that time before the Affordable Care Act. There were a lot of uninsured people, and so that we saw them, and we were able to have that experience of working with low amount of resources to try to provide the best care we could as residents. And after I graduated, I finished residency, I went into practice at a community clinic, federal qualified health clinic, Northeast Community Clinic, which is in downtown. And so I work with mostly underinsured and uninsured people, because there are still uninsured people. With the undocumented people don't have insurance. They can't qualify for Medi-Cal. So you have to go through a different program in order to get insurance. And some people are actually unable to get Medicaid insurance for other reasons as well. And they don't get the private insurance, so that we provide care with anybody. We don't deny service to anybody there, and so that's my background. So I work with those patients.
You've covered a lot of territory already. I wonder, Mario oftentimes connects us with Latin America and Central America, and perhaps we should get back a little bit to the Guatemala of today. Mario?
Oh, yes. It's a very interesting background. And I heard you are originally, or your parents from Guatemala. Have you been following the politics of Guatemala? What is happening there right now?
Right. So I follow it kind of circumferentially outside, but I do know about the main problem, I believe, in Guatemala is the poor distribution of resources. So there's a lot of agricultural, there are a lot of farmers, a lot of people that are peasant farmers in Guatemala. 2/3 of the population, I believe, is indigenous. So they don't speak, they're of Mayan origin. That's the heart of the Mayan civilization was in Guatemala. So now they're actually descendants from the Mayans there in Guatemala that actually make up most of the population, and most of the population are farmers, but they don't have. Most of the land is owned by large companies. It seems like, based on my last assessment, and so there's a pretty poor distribution of land in Guatemala. And that's part of like the distributed policy, right? The ownership economy, in Guatemala is something that might help people. If they're able to own more land, more resources, they would be able to sustain themselves, because they're really hard workers. They're very hard workers. But unfortunately, there is that But secondly, there is a lot of corruption in the government in Guatemala historically. And there was a United States Commission on Impunity, Preventing Impunity, I believe it is, that actually did help the situation in Guatemala. There were in the past people who got away with murder pretty much in the past, who are now being held accountable through this commission. And I believe it's through this commission that they were able to find the corruption charges against the former president, who was taken out of office, and the vice president as well, which is pretty unprecedented in Guatemala, because Guatemala pretty much corruption had gone on with impunity in the past. So now that people were held accountable, it was refreshing for a lot of population that just kind of threw up their hands and made jokes about how, government officials, they put, half of the money for people and half of them in their pocket. That was like a running joke for everybody. But now it's really nice to see that actually people are held accountable for that. And that's I think those are the two major issues right now. That commission was actually defunded or had lower funding in the past years. I'm hoping and praying that they fund it again so it could continue its work.
Guatemala has a very rich cultural background as well. I still remember one of the books that moved me very greatly was El Señor Presidente, Mr. President by Miguel Ángel Asturias, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1967.
Right.
And it is really a masterpiece, and inspired another book by a Paraguayan who won the Cervantes Prize, Yo el Supremo, Augusto Roabastos. And so it's a very similar situation that we suffer also in the South. Even a curiosity, I think, I still remember that Miguel Ángel Asturias was supporter of the dictatorship of Méndez Montenegro in the 1960s, while he was a great writer. So that shows you how you need sometimes to survive in a very hostile environment, even though you may not agree with all this authoritarian way of doing political things. So it's just a comment.
Yes. See, Miguel Ángel Asturias also wrote Hombres de Maíz, Men of Maize, which is also a masterpiece as well. But yes, I haven't read El Señor Presidente. My mother has, but it's my reading list, my long reading list.
It's delicious.
Yes.
Well, we have a novelist in our midst, Christopher Zehnder, and I wonder, Christopher, where should we go next in this extraordinary account of Dr. Trabanino's background?
It occurs to me, discussing Guatemala, I think most Americans don't pay much attention to places like Guatemala, except insofar as they impact us. So, and the way they impact us, of course, is through immigration. Perhaps you could give us some light as to the immigration from Guatemala and something about the immigrants. I think the basic assumption of a lot of Americans is that they're coming here to simply take advantage of us. That they're not responding to perhaps injustices and hardships in their own land, and perhaps injustices which might be tied in some way our own policies. So, since you work with immigrants, it'd be good to hear your perspective.
Yes, thank you. So most of I think the large majority of people that come from Guatemala who are coming here are looking for economic opportunities. And I think that they are seeking economic asylum in a way. And I think secondarily, there's other issues in terms of violence and the drug trafficking as well, and that's in its relation to violence that's going on in Guatemala. But I think that that's isolated to certain areas of the country. I think that a lot of the areas mostly are suffering from economic hardships, especially in the rural areas of Guatemala, where most of the government does not extend that far out to assist people as much. If you're able to travel the country, it's very beautiful, a lot of natural resources, but there is that that kind of disparity in terms of the distribution of resources. The city itself is very modernized. Looks like any modern city. But as you go out, you see, these rural areas that people, they live under really poor conditions with housing that's pretty much like laminated roofs in some cases. There's a famous song, Las Casas de Cartón, which is basically like the houses of cardboard. It's something similar. People, in some instances, and that was a few years back when I went before, there were still people living in those situations. And so there is that disparity in terms of the resources, I think. And so people are fleeing that because the cost of living actually is extraordinary, is kind of high. Unless you, if you go to any kind of restaurant or any kind of food chain, the prices are the same as here, but people make a small portion of the money they would make in this country. So it's really, the prices are American prices or United States prices, but the wages are much lower. They're third world kind of wages. So it's really extraordinary that what's expected of people in order to sustain themselves compared to poor people here. Over there, it's a different situation. So I think that's the case.
You mentioned earlier about land ownership and land division. I don't know if they're still calling it, but you're talking about something like latifundia, and that most of the land is owned not by people themselves, but by large corporations. What are those corporations? What are they? What is the status of land ownership?
Right. So like, for example, like the bananas, right? Chiquita bananas, a lot of them are raised in Guatemala. If you go to certain areas in Guatemala, they're huge, very fertile lands that are all banana fields, or all coffee. The coffee is a large export also, a lot of coffee that's grown there. So a lot of coffee that's like really high class is now in Starbucks. People drink their Starbucks coffee. It's grown in Guatemala, and it's from those very fertile lands. And so it's a situation that I think would benefit from a kind of a distributive policy that you kind of incentivizes people to have more ownership of their land. But I think the government has to somehow facilitate that, maybe by buying the land off of the companies and selling it at a good price to people at a reasonable price. I think that's probably the best policy, but I think hasn't reached that point yet.
Why do you think it hasn't?
I think it's probably the corruption of the government, and there has been some work. I think they're thinking it's better, the distribution, than it was in the past, but it's slow progress, and I think it's largely from the corruption from the government and unwillingness to do that kind of project.
Back to Los Angeles and your work here. Whenever I go on my own or with an elderly relative or with a not so elderly relative, whenever I go to the doctor, first question, and what kind of insurance do you have? What kind of insurance do you have? Good morning, what kind of insurance do you have?
Exactly.
Now, I think that initiates a certain tension. Fortunately, I have some insurance, but so many of the clients that you have inadequate insurance. And how does that affect them, and how does it affect you? And could you explore that a bit with us?
So yeah, and that is something that bothered me the whole time, right? Because of my faith, it's like, why are we denying people? Why are we denying people any kind of care? And so that's why I got into that field. I wanted to be in a clinic where nobody was denied care, and so that's I know some clinics, they can't do that. I heard stories of Good Samaritan Hospital, denying care to people. So it's like they're Good Samaritan Hospital, they're denying care to the Samaritan. So, but in our clinic, we try to we have the subsidies from the government, so we're able to see those patients, right? And we are able to so federal health, the FQHCs or federally qualified health centers are able to they have subsidies from the government in order to see those patients, right? It's not that we're better than Good Samaritan, but we just have the money to see them because Medicaid and those kinds of insurances, you could lose money from that. You can't sustain the doctors, all the staff, all the tests that are done, which are sent out to a laboratory, which is like a third-party laboratory, which has their own prices. You can't send out to MRIs for patients or other studies because they have their own prices. You can't sustain paying all those people unless you have that help. So, it is nice. I don't have to see all of that because I get to see all the patients, but I know that this happens in the background. And, but it's something that is a moral obligation, I think, to be able to provide that care that people need. And I think it's that the thinking, which I did not like, is from some physicians who wanted to ration care because they thought it was too costly and they would be held accountable because they're not meeting the cost and the cost ratios that they should be reaching. And in the end, that could hurt the care of the patient, especially older patients, because older patients need more care. And in some cases, people say, some physicians, and this goes towards the end, the pro-life physician theme. Some physicians would say they're going to die anyway, so why spend so much money on them? And that's not, they don't say it explicitly, but they mean it. So there's somebody that goes to the hospital that goes for pneumonia or something like that could be treated, right? And the patient has Alzheimer's or some kind of illness that maybe might kill them sometime in the future, but we don't know when. I got a call from one physician one time who told me, oh, this patient needs to be put on hospice care. They need to be put on this program where they don't receive kind of minimal care, and eventually they'll die. And he didn't say explicitly, but he wanted to save resources, save money. And that really bothered me. And I think that's the culture that doctors are kind of pressured under. But I just refuse to kind of play along with that. So I still send my patients, even if they're elderly, I try to provide the best care I would provide to my own parents. And I don't try to ration care. But a lot of physicians don't, they have that pressure. So, it's unfortunate. It's not a good situation, but I think that our faith does give us that strength in order to kind of hopefully the policies can be put into place where that is not the case and more people are valued. This is by being older or unborn or anybody is valued.
A couple of anecdotes. Some people specialize in longitudinal studies, but my own area of concentration is anecdotes. Anyway, a couple of anecdotes. When we go into an emergency room, for various reasons, even in an emergency room, the first question is, what kind of insurance do you have? The very first question. Now, that's anecdote number one. Anecdote number two. Last night I was in a debate with a few other fellow candidates, and we, in this debate format, were quizzed by a panel of experts. And one of the experts began by saying, I'm in the healthcare industry, and then went on to ask various industrial questions about the healthcare industry. So I said to him, suppose somebody, it's important how you frame a question. Suppose somebody said, I'm in the education industry. Or suppose somebody said, I'm in the political discourse industry. We only use that language, I think, in a context of really a broad capitalism. And the very notion of healthcare as a service, healthcare as being misunderstood if it's presented as an industry, I think that's a real indicator of a deep problem.
Yes. Yes, I think that thinking about healthcare as for profit is just it's an evil thing. I think underlying, and it shouldn't be that way. In the beginning, it was the early church that began the hospitals, right? And it was a form of charity, and now all of a sudden it's a form of profit, and so that twisted in a way that it never was intended to be. And a lot of physicians, they go into the field for that reason. They want to be charitable. And, it does make our lives more, it does make it people more jaded, right? As they get older and they're in this profession for a while, they're set in their routine that, we can't send for this study, or, we can't really see this patient, that sort of thing. And it just people just are they go along with that system, and it is a twisting of the system. And I think that the non-profit kind of way of thinking about it is ideal. So having a system where it's not really you're getting profit, you don't have shareholders, you're just doing the work and you're using all the resources you have in order to provide care to the patients. And there is a lot of overhead a lot of times for the care. So there's administrative overhead and other people that are pushing papers, and I think there's a lot of waste in that aspect sometimes, because it's not really needed many times. It's a direct physician insurance relationship probably be a little bit more effective. Also, probably being able to negotiate prices, right, for different services, because a lot of these prices that the pharmaceutical companies and imaging companies they are charging are just exorbitant, and so that really crushes the system. So like MRIs on hundreds of dollars. We've had MRIs for a long time. Why is it costing hundreds of dollars still? That sort of thing. We're in the capitalist system, so why not use that in terms of getting the lowest price, and then everybody will adjust accordingly. But we don't have that now. We just pay whatever somebody asks for. We don't even renegotiate. That's what my understanding is of how hospitals work. They don't have that system. And that's part of, I think, a way of cutting some of the costs that are associated with healthcare that are really too high. And if the Medicare and the costs go as they are now, I've seen projections of it, really blowing up hugely because of the healthcare costs and because of the aging population. And it's I think that there are a lot of solutions that could be had that could alleviate the situation for sure.
Mario, can you take us forward?
Well, it's a very interesting conversation, and I was listening very carefully. Perhaps your description of the situation in healthcare can lead us to make a reflection about our society. Let me point out a couple of things. When you were talking, remind me what Spanish philosopher, contemporary Spanish philosopher said, an ethicist, said that what we have in our contemporary society, industrialized world, is not fear of the stranger or the foreigner. What we fear or have phobia is we fear the poor, because we don't complain when people come here are foreigners and they are rich and they go to the best hotels. Rather, we just welcome them because they're spending money. And yet, when some people who has no means is coming here for opportunity, then people are discriminated, are denied services, and so on. So what our society are showing is what she called aporophobia, aporos, without way of doing things, and phobia, some rejection. And that's across the board, generally in the industrialized world. And that shows that we need to start thinking about not only the healthcare industry, which is precisely the whole language of contractual language, if you will. I give you that and you give me that. and then is infiltrated or is contaminated when we need to give a service. Now, having said that, I do believe that political proposal of the American Solidarity Party is key in building this new culture, because there is something there that is missing in this society, which is pretty much utilitarian, which is solidarity. And I think what you expose there is precisely the way to go. Is how then we can reach to people who has no means, but they are human beings, they are brothers and sisters, and then we need to embrace them and we need to provide those services. So what do you think about this solidarity issue of the American Solidarity Party? Is that what attracted you to the party?
Yeah, so originally when I was, I was not really aligned with with the pro-life stance in the past, and that was partly because of my training at UCLA. UCLA, there was no pro-life, there were no pro-life kind of mentors there. They were all, use contraception. The abortion is a choice of the woman, that kind of thing. And there was no other option given at that point. And so I really didn't have a mentor. I had two mentors when I was later on in my medical school training, two women who were Catholic, who did have religious exemptions from contraception, prescription, and other things like that. And so they provided an early mentorship to me, and that gave me the idea later that this is possible as a physician. So it's nice to have that. So I think that's important for physicians to have mentors in order to guide them on that path. But yeah, I started becoming more pro-life in the past few years as I got stronger in my faith. Started praying the rosary every day and listening to Catholic radio. I listen to relevant radio now pretty much every day. It's really helped me with my faith formation. And I just, at this point, this last election, I just couldn't vote for the Democrats. I used to be a Democrat for, all the time. My parents were Democrats, and that's just what we did. You voted Democrat. And, that, and also watching this movie Unplanned, that really changed my perspective, because it got behind what's going on behind closed doors in Planned Parenthood and what they really do. And so all that led me away from that, and I just couldn't in conscious do that anymore. Even prior to that, I already had requested, having a religious exemption from referring patients to abortions in the past, which providers will come if a woman comes to you as a primary care doctor, even as a primary care doctor, and they come, they're pregnant and they seek an abortion. They need you to sign off on a paper to refer them out. You're not doing the abortion yourself, but you're signing off on a paper that can refer them to an abortion. And so that after doing that for a few years, I just weighted on my soul, and I couldn't take it anymore. I told the supervisor, I just can't do this anymore. It was after a lady who was maybe in 14 weeks or something like that. I just couldn't take it anymore. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I don't care if I don't work here anymore. I can't do this anymore. And at that point, then that's when I found that there is a way of doing it. There's a way of not having to do that, not having to violate your conscience. And I didn't have that kind of the guidance from anybody. And so that I think that's important for physicians that are pro-life to gather together, to unite, and to be able to mentor other medical students that are coming through. And so, to answer your question the roundabout way, I got into the party because I couldn't vote for the Democrats anymore. And I certainly couldn't vote for Republicans anymore because of their stance on immigration and the poor and cutting food stamps and all those things. It was contrary to what Jesus had taught us to do, to not reject the stranger and the unclothed, the clothed, unclothed, all those things, all those commandments. So that's where I was searching, and Kanye West was a popular guy who was pro-life, and so maybe this guy could be the right one I could vote for. But on the California ballot, he was vice president on the ballot, I believe was put, and so he wasn't actually on the ballot even as a write-in. but I looked for other write-in candidates, and I found the American Solidarity Party, Brian Carroll. I looked it up, and wow, this party exists. I didn't know anything about it before. I had no idea about the party before, and wow, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. It's something that aligns with the faith and with my faith. And so at that point, then, as I really started getting involved more thoroughly with the American Solidarity Party, and it's been kind of a mission for me, because politics has been pretty much corrupted up to now, and there is not really a moral kind of perspective. There's no really search for the truth across the board. Only half truths for some things, but twisted truth for other things. But the American Solidarity Party, it seeks to find the common ground based on truth, and based on we're informed by our Christian tradition. And so I really appreciate that everybody is really thoughtful in the party, and we try to find solutions that will find common ground and are based on reasoning. And so in terms of healthcare, the solidarity is pretty much goes hand in hand with healthcare, because you are dealing with everybody that needs basic physical care. And mental care, and in many cases spiritual care. People really need spiritual care in a holistic approach, which I've been working on more recently. Has helped my patients quite a bit, because they're deprived of their spiritual care, and studies show that people that don't go to church as often, they are more depressed. There are studies that show there are more incidents of that. And people that pray, and studies have shown that prayer helps people in terms of depression, anxiety, particularly anxiety. So I've been using that for my patients. And I don't know if you know of Saint Giuseppe, but he's a saint from the 19th century who actually encourages patients to go to the sacraments and to go to church. And that actually helped his patients, because I feel like where the soul goes, the body goes. And so now I've seen a big difference and a change in my patients from doing that. So I think that it goes hand in hand, solidarity and healthcare and the whole person.
A holistic, integrated approach, body and soul, not separate. Christopher, what next?
Well, you said you couldn't vote Republican, and I understand why you couldn't. Why you couldn't vote Democratic. But a lot of people call themselves pro-life. We use the term pro-life an awful lot, and it's almost like it's a. I wonder if you're. When I listen to you, it seems like many of your ideas, particularly on healthcare, service to the poor, are very different from a lot of the ideas that the kind of people who call themselves pro-life who voted for, say, Republicans in the last election. Maybe to clarify, what do you mean by being pro-life? Is it merely being anti-abortion, or is it include something more than that?
Right. So when I say pro-life, I particularly mean I focus on abortion, but it's also on euthanasia. And I know that the perspective of the party is whole life, right? This is a new concept, right? Whole life. And I guess I have been whole life all my life. And I've been more whole life recently now that I'm pro-life. But by pro-life, I mean, I focus on abortion because I think that's the biggest scourge nowadays. Like every day, there's thousands of abortions that are done based on the last statistics. It's more than 2,000 abortions, I believe it is. It just eclipses any other issue in terms of anything else, in terms of death penalty, in terms of euthanasia. And so it just seems like the biggest, the thing that should be focused on the most. It's this running Holocaust that goes on every day that people accept now. And so I think that's why I focus on that. But for myself particularly, it's important to be consistent, and it does. My conscience is not right if I'm not consistent. So for me, pro-life also involves older people, from womb to the tomb, right? So everybody, and it involves also the perspective of the poor and not denying the poor access to care and to economic opportunities, and also the immigrants. So I think that's part of being pro-life. I think is involving that. But I think politically, everyone knows that pro-life stands what it means. That's why I use that term. But I understand what you're saying. I think a lot of times nowadays, people that say they're pro-life, now with the political landscape the way it is, people try to convince themselves that certain things are okay. I think that they say, okay, pro-life, that's for sure. You know, there's no way you can argue that. But you know, the immigrants, you know, they're putting a burden on us, you know, and so it's really kind of, you know, we're putting a burden on people that live on the border and people that work here that need to provide for their families. They try to twist it around to make it justified, but underlying, I'm pretty sure they know that it's not right. It's not Christian, and so I think they don't have a choice though. They can't go to the Democratic Party. They don't want to vote for it. And there's no really a good third party that's pro-life, as far as I knew, until the American Solidarity Party. And so I think that's where American Solidarity Party can provide a niche. And I think these people that in the past have been really Republican and, you know, no government, you know, kind of government, no government stance, pro-life. I think they'll go into the American Solidarity Party. I think that they'll understand that the beauty of it and the truth of it.
Well, especially true when they get to see Jim Hanink as governor of California. Right, Jim?
Oh, yeah.
Listen, update. I shared this, Rene, I shared this with Mario and Christopher before the show started. Even though the latest polls show that I have no support, none, among those who are likely to vote, I do have 2% support among those who are unlikely to vote. Go figure, as they say. Go figure a way to get that 2% to vote. Now, Rene, you've shown splendid initiative in putting together some funds to advertise the party. Could you tell us about that project?
So yeah, I think that Brian Carroll said one time that the greatest part, the greatest asset that the party has is the platform, and so people know about the platform, they'll vote for the party. It doesn't matter who is on the ticket, because you know the platform indicates what the person stands for.
I mean, it could be Zehnder. Zehnder could be on the ticket.
Yeah, Zehnder could be next
time. That would put him off.
But it does help. It does help to have a charismatic guy like you, Mr. Hanink. Who has such great jokes. You know, it's like you can't buy that. So yeah, so it's I was working on. I think that people, if they know about the party, they'll be able to vote for the party. And I think I don't know if they've had any surveys done, but I'm suspecting that less than 1% of the electorate knows about the American Solidarity Party. That if we get that up to 20%, 10%, we will have a great amount of people voting for the American Solidarity Party. And that's why I went into this ad campaign, because I think that people, if they know what we stand for generally, so I was thinking the ad would have the basics: pro-life, pro-worker, pro-immigrant, pro-religious liberty, pro-environment. People will know, hey, wait, this is the Democratic Party, Republican? What is this? Wait a minute, this is all I stand for. And they'll vote for that party. So I think if the people know about it, they'll vote for that party. I think it's the main thing. We just need exposure of the party and more recognition.
We do indeed. We do indeed. Mario.
Yeah, I have a question. You said your parents came from Guatemala, and generally people who come from Latin America are faithful Catholic most of the time. But generally, the first generation who are educated here are not as faithful as their parents are. And then sometimes become, what you say, well, some pro-choice, and then go to college, and then move away from the faith. To what extent do you think this phenomenon is true?
So yeah, I think that is the case for the first generation children of immigrants, that they tend to acclimate towards kind of the United States kind of culture, And part of that is absorbing all the popular culture, which gives all this false information. So their models are, I don't know, Justin Bieber. I don't know who's the model now, but they look to these models for like guidance, and it just provides this falsehood that they tend to believe, because everyone, if you look at everything that's out there, like you go to Twitter and the mainstream news or the popular culture, and it all aligns with, this is what you need to do in order to be happy. You need to get this car, you need to get this phone. If you do that, if you don't have children, just, work on your career, do these things, and you'll be happy. And I think with my experience with a lot of patients that have followed that path, they're in their 50s and they figure out, hey, this is my life was a waste, and all those things were a lie, and it's too late at that point. And that's why I like work. I'm a family physician, so I work with all ages. So I see, I'm a pediatrician in a way too. I see children as well, and I see adolescents, and I really love working with adolescents, because at that stage is when you can you give them the first indications of what is true. And I think that physicians really have a lot of power in order to be able to help these kids go on the right path. That people really, they do respect opinions of physicians still. There's one of the few people respect nowadays. And so I think that it's important to provide, information, so they could consent to something with information on hand, so they give informed consent. So if they do something that's kind of lead them on a wrong path, at least give them information that this is what's going to happen if you do it. So you were warned, and then they'll be able to make the right decision. For example, I talked to the adolescents about having sex before marriage, and how a study from the Institute of Family Studies that indicate that people that have sex before marriage, they have higher divorce rates, and they have not as happy marriages when they do get married. And so I tell them these studies, and they're like, they take it in. They're like, okay, so I tell them, the studies are indicating it's better to just wait, and then you could avoid diseases. You could avoid sexually transmitted diseases. Human papillomavirus, which is very common now because of this situation. A lot of premarital sex has happened in the past year since the 60s, and all other diseases. And so they take that in, and I think it's helped a lot of them to be able to be chaste and abstinent, and that's helped them be happier, because they're able to focus on a lot of things, their faith, other things. They're not, I think that a lot of times, I think that in addition, it's going to help them in their future with their families if they do get married. And that's one thing. Also, tell them about pornography, and how that's damaging, because pornography is a scourge to a lot of young boys, and now it's everywhere. Before, it used to be just you go to the corner store or the adult store to get it. Now it's like on the internet, on your phone. So I tell them about the studies that indicate the damage that it does mentally to people and in their relationships, and at least they have the information to be able to make the right decision. And also the benefits of prayer, I tell them about that, and the benefits of really practicing their faith, I tell them about that. And I share my faith sometimes. I share that I'm Catholic, and they see a model, somebody that practices their faith, and they're a physician, they have a family, maybe it'll work out. So people they don't provide that sometimes, and physicians are in the position to be able to do that. And it's out of love, and it's out of concern for these kids that I do that. And I think that it's important to give that information, because in society now, people don't have that information. And that's why we've gone down this path, that pretty much we have all lies everywhere. People don't say the full truth of what are the ramifications of doing certain things. And, that's why I try to provide that. Even in the Garden of Eden, right? Adam and Eve, they got informed consent, right? God said, if you eat from that tree, you will die. Okay. They got the information. They got the information they needed, right, to make their decision, and they made their decision based on that information, right? They had informed consent. So people now need that. They need to know, like, this can happen if you do this, and I think it helps them, I think, along the path.
Important. Now, I want to connect with some of your experiences with the California Catholic Conference and the Los Angeles Archdiocese Office of Life, Peace, and Justice. And here's a lead in to that connection. It's really commonplace for a bishop here or a bishop there to say, look, what the church teaches doesn't align perfectly with the Democratic Party, and it doesn't align perfectly with the Republican Party. And then some commentator will say, you know, in a way, we're politically isolated, or even political orphans. And now comes the American Solidarity Party. And what we want to say is, not so, not so. Our platform is fully in accord with Catholic teaching. It's fully in accord with much Protestant teaching. We have a kind of an alliance with a certain group of Reformed Christians. And how do we make this known to people like the bishops, people like the Catholic Conference of State Number 1, State Number 2, State Number 3? I happened to read, and I think a number of people in the party from time to time read a journal called First Things. And in that latest issue of the journal, there was an overview of thinking in the church today by a fellow who has a column, a regular column in the New York Times. But the American Solidarity Party went unmentioned. And what I like to do is get on my Harley and go cross country and say, listen up, guy, listen up. So I guess in practical terms, it comes down to when you talk to church leaders, can you let them know that things are changing?
Yeah, actually, I've had the opportunity to, well, I'm in my parish. I'm part of St. Vincent de Paul ministry is there as on the side. So we work with homeless and people that suffer, that have issues in terms of housing and evictions. And so I had connections with the Office of Life, Justice, and Peace even at that point. But now with the American Solidarity Party, I've been working with Isaac Cuevas, who works over there, and also Kathleen Domingo, who you know as well. And so we've been working on this end of SB 380, which is the euthanasia bill, the expansion of it, and trying to defeat it. So we've been trying to work together in collaboration in terms of the work with the church itself. So that the Catholic, the California Catholic Conference, it advocates for the church, and it's in terms of dealing with policymakers, and it's pretty much like an advocacy group for the church teaching in the capital of the state. And so they work with the bishops, but the thing about it is that I think that I think that people don't know about the party as much as they should in the church. So I've been trying to help with that, and I've reached out to my local bishop, Bishop Clark, who's here in the Culver City area. I think he is also in Inglewood area, but I met with him actually with Desmond Silveira, and we talked about the Solidarity Party and American Solidarity Party, and what we're doing, what kind of work we're doing, and he blessed our work, and he was really excited. He was really was let's say agreed with what we were doing, and was going to talk to the president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, Archbishop Gomez, about our party. So he probably does know about us now. So that's a good thing. And I've been trying to reach out to Bishop Barron as well, and in a role of basically getting guidance from them and what they think in terms of our party and what its platform, and also the blessing, and also at the same time they'll know what we do. And it's nice that this, the thing about COVID is giving us the opportunity to be able to meet on these platforms now, and so be able to meet, pretty much more readily now. And that was nice to be able to meet with the bishop on this platform, kind of similar platform, and hopefully we could do that with other bishops that are farther away. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
Well, you are a superb spokesman for us in those cooperative efforts. Christopher, we're getting close to the end here. Final thoughts?
I'm just curious, so having been a California refugee living in Ohio, well, there are a lot of conceptions about California. I wonder, what is it like? So I've heard people express that in the United States as a whole, but especially a place like California, it's going to be almost impossible for a man of conscience to be a physician. Is that happening? Is that getting closer, do you think, or is that just a lot?
Yeah. So as you know, the policymakers, the politicians have been trying to. They're pretty much persecuting the church and any church and related institutions like hospitals or Catholic hospitals are trying to force their hand to violate all their consciences. And I think, and that happens across the board. There's not really easy path in order to get conscience protection. I would appreciate that the Trump administration had the agency that helped get complaints about conscience violations, and that's something important that policymakers can do is provide an outlet for people to be able to easily file those complaints and without fear of repercussions. But yes, you do feel, especially I work in a secular organization, I've had in the past felt like a martyr in a way that for the things that I do, I've been, deprived of things that I would normally have done. They don't make it easy to do it in terms of filing for these religious exemptions. They make it sound like Medicaid, they really can't pay us if we don't provide all the services that they really need to require to be provided. And so it puts them at a loss if we don't provide abortion, like access. If we won't get funding from the government, from Medicaid, which is taxpayer funded, if we don't do this. So they make it seem like, oh yes, there's no other option, but there is an option always. And I think back, my wife read this book called The Nazi Doctors. As you know, during the Holocaust, doctors were involved in, directing people towards the gas chamber or being killed. They would provide injections to kill people, like lethal injections. And they would do this under the situation like, I'm just following orders. I'm just falling under this situation. It's the law, and it doesn't matter what my conscience is. The law. I can't do anything else. You don't have to do that. You have to have conviction as a physician, especially because you're provided this opportunity that is God given to be able to provide this care and to this influence. And you should use it adequately. Those that are given more are expected more, right? The scripture says so. You as a physician, I feel that burden. I haven't done enough. I do more, and it's because I've been provided this opportunity. So I think that physicians need to not be cowards, and we need to have conviction because we are in the position that we could provide that kind of guidance. I'm part of the Catholic Medical Association, which is, I never was part of the American Medical Association. Originally, they were against universal health care, and now they're for eliminating sex from birth certificates. And so they're just a mess that is not based on science and just based on ideology. So I'm not dealing with that. I never liked them. They send me their journals, but I think that physicians, especially, pro-life physicians, need to gather together and form an organization. I think the Catholic Medical Association provides that kind of a way of being able to have a different group to lobby and the policymakers. They know that there is a different perspective on these issues, and there's a lot of different other pro-life organizations, OB/GYN organizations, and pediatrics organizations as well. So I think it's possible. And I think in California, the next question will probably be with California, is it possible for somebody to be voted in, in a different party than Democrat? Yes, it is. I think a lot of people just need they need to have that opportunity. And a lot, especially of our immigrant population and Latin American population, they just need that. They have a cultural, lean towards voting Democrat, but they just need the opportunity to have another option.
Well, we have Jim. He's our option.
He's the option.
That's right. As long as he stops telling so many jokes.
Getting serious here. Getting serious. Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI quite often used a Latin phrase, et si Deus non doretur. A rough translation would be as if God didn't exist. And when we have debates about conscience, I think oftentimes conscience is understood as one's serious convictions and convictions that one would feel bad about not following. And so someone says, well, that's against my conscience. And then the opposition says, well, it would be against our conscience not to. And so which conscience is going to prevail? Well, which conscience prevails is a function then of the law. The consciences of some people have legal support, and the consciences of other people don't have legal support. And then the debate goes on, and someone says, how could we do it differently? I mean, we all, or most of us, have convictions that we feel bad about going against. So what's so special about your conscience? Why is your conscience any better than my conscience? And of course, this is the refusal of the secular order to acknowledge the existence of God. There's a refusal in much of intellectual discourse to debate seriously whether or not God exists. A lot of the debate is carried on by arched eyebrows and shoulder shrugs. So conscience as decisive, I think, depends on one's acknowledgement of God, and conscience as God speaking within one's heart. Newman says famously, conscience is a judge, but it's also a vicar. It's practical reasoning, one's last best exercise of practical reasoning. But it's also simultaneously the voice of God speaking in one's heart. And that's something that I think is almost unfathomable in the intellectual discourse and in actual institutional life. So, just as you're supposed to do theology on your knees, I think we need to do politics on our knees. I think that's important as well.
For sure. Or medicine.
And on this show, we always end with God's word, which is sharper than any two-edged sword. The gospel in today's liturgy is from Matthew. At that time, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a Canaanite woman of that district came and called out, "Have pity on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by the demon." But he did not say a word in answer to her. His disciples came and asked him, Send her away, for she keeps calling out after us. He said in reply, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But the woman came and did him homage, saying, "Lord, help me." He said in reply, "It is not right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Please, Lord, for even the dogs eat the scraps that fall from the tables of their masters." Then Jesus said to her in reply, "O woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." and her daughter was healed that hour. Come, Lord Jesus, come. Thank you very much, Rene.
Thank
It's a
you.
pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Appreciate it. Continue. Siempre adelante con juicio.
We see each other in Sacramento.
No siempre adelante con chistes, pero con juicio.
Don Juicio.
Take care. Bye bye.
God bless.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.